So I suppose I started in music when I was probably 13, 14, 15, was in bands at school, played bass guitar very badly, and definitely at that stage I think I was kind of more interested in the gear than in making music. Didn't have the skill at the music to feel like this was something I should really be doing. Then kind of grew up, didn't really do much for music for probably till maybe my 30s maybe. But in between, went to journalism school, went to work in magazines, in music magazines. So I worked for MixMag very, very long time ago. Was editor of MixMag, was deputy editor of The Face. And that was at the period where you had dance music just being the biggest thing kind of in the country. You'd go to the Winter Music Conference in Miami, come back with a pile of 12 inches, and then 6 months later they would all be kind of top 10 records. And it was a very kind of weird time compared with now. I think you've probably gone back to having kind of an underground and things that don't become enormous pop music. So I did that for a while, then went to The Face, and then went to work for The Times. So I was head of digital at The Times during that period where you had kind of Leveson and phone hacking. Was there for about 7 years, then left that and went into sort of product development. So worked for a company called Magnetic, which someone like Vogue will ring us up and say, we want to launch a new B2B publication. And I would go and work with them for 9 months and help them figure out what that would be, help them prototype it, help them build it, help them launch it. And so that's sort of my day job. But back when I was sort of just towards the end of when I was at the Times, I'd gradually got slowly into electronics. So Tom Buggs from Bristol did a workshop up on Brick Lane, in 93 Feet East on Brick Lane, where he said, come and learn to make a little oscillator. And it was like a standalone little kind of card oscillator like this. You plug in a battery, had a little speaker on it. And it turned up and we sat in this little room, about 8 or 9 people. As I remember it, very dimly lit, which is quite difficult for building electronics. But we sat there and put them all together, soldered in the resistors and capacitors and the battery holders and the little knobs. And he kind of, it's very useful to be taught how to do that the first time, because learning how to do it, it's one of those things when you've never soldered, it's really, really difficult. Once you've learned how to do it, it's very easy. It's like it's like riding a bike. It's very straightforward. So Tom taught me how to do that. I assembled this thing, and you went from this kind of pile of little, what I now know as resistors and capacitors and switches and things, and you stuck it together, you put in a battery, and then it became this kind of weird, kind of pulsing, alive kind of oscillator, kind of chaotic oscillator. It's like 3 oscillators together. Then eventually, about 2012, I think, 2011 maybe, a couple of my friends were in London and said, right, we're going to go to this modular synth thing. There was an event. One of my friends said to me, oh, you do this DIY stuff. You could do DIY stuff in modular. People would love that. And that was kind of sparked the seed. Started buying things, started getting into it. Started designing simple kind of circuits and publishing them into forums. So that idea of publishing the way you would publish a blog or the way you publish an article. So you design something, you publish it, and then other people can make it, which is the kind of open source sort of principle. Started doing that, and gradually people sort of liked that, they picked up on it. I designed this sequencer called Turing Machine, which is a kind of random looping sequencer. And when I published that, very quickly, a chap on the forum called Steve said, this is good, I should create a kind of group buy for this. And that group buy became what is now Thonk, which is a sort of hardware record label in Brighton, which is now a really big, really professional operation that manufactures and sells kits and parts and kind of funds or sort of supplies the sort of DIY synthesizer market across Europe and the US. So I designed things here, I design them with kind of soldering them, or a lot of it's just on a computer. It's creating circuit board layouts, or it's prototyping things. When it's designed, I send it off to Steve in Brighton. He says, oh, that's great, we should manufacture those. Or sometimes he's like, I'm not sure we need too many of these because they might be a bit odd. But then he does all of the kind of manufacturing and distribution side of it. So I design them, he kind of publishes them. And that's been going on for now 12 years, I think. So I'll just do a few. So you turn them over, mount them in the circuit board holder thing. Grab a reel of solder. And then you might, open a window if you're really getting into it. So you should have some little puffs of smoke coming up here. And yeah, anyone watching this will be aghast at the lack of smoke extraction here. But normally I just have a little fan that blows it away. There are sort of specific high points, which I think are when you have those little breakthroughs, when you have a moment where something that seemed impossible reveals itself as being possible. Something that felt complicated and difficult reveals itself as being simple. Something that felt expensive becomes cheap. And I keep talking about expensive and cheap just because that means you're able to sell it for a lower price and more people can buy it. There's a real breakthrough as well when you see other people using them. So I once designed a module that had a contact microphone in the front panel of the module. So, and it really was a kind of joke. It was like, wouldn't it be funny if you could hear the switches and hear like plugging things, patching in and out of your modular. And we put it out and people started using it in ways I couldn't have imagined. So people were doing things like taking a waterproof contact microphone, freezing it in a block of ice, and then recording the sound of the ice melting, which seemed amazing to me. And then people started using it to trigger kind of delays and trigger resonators. And I remember seeing a video of somebody with a pencil, with the little rubber on the end of the pencil, just tapping the panel with these tones coming out in an incredibly kind of musical way. And that, for me, was such a kind of breakthrough of I can create something that is open, that people can use in different ways, but I can't predict how they're going to use it. And if I'm trying to predict how they're going to use it, that might well be limiting it in some way. So it's always trying to sort of say, this is what I have, this is how I understand it, but I can't possibly understand what you're going to do with it. I don't know if there's a destination with music thing. I think everything that's happened since I started doing it has sort of been a surprise. I think there's sometimes I've had ideas that I've been thinking about for years, for 20, 30 years, that I still haven't worked out what is the answer. So there are some very specific kind of things where I'm like, I really like this idea and it's really interesting. Lots of people have done very good things with it. I haven't had an idea that takes it on anywhere, so I haven't done anything with it. But at some point maybe that idea will appear, or some new component will appear that will make me go, oh, actually I can do that now. Or maybe I'll see something that I've never heard of before and I'll be able to do a kind of diluted or concentrated version of that where it makes sense. So there's that thing of lots of ideas bubbling around that they're stuck. They're not going anywhere. I mean, there's a basic thing of, since I started, I always wanted to do something that was kind of self-contained, and that's something that I'm working on at the moment, having a thing that isn't part of a big rack of other things, or isn't something you plug into a computer, which we've done a couple of those sorts of things in the past, but something you can sit down and give to kind of any kind of musician, and they can say, this is very weird and very complicated and very intricate, but it's not part of something else. You don't need a kind of learning curve, or you don't need a kind of infrastructure around it to use it. So that's something I'm kind of working on at the moment, and that's been quite a different way of understanding. It's a different set of questions to try and answer.